Random thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read a part of Sir Charles Elliot's book where he suggests that, or he gives a proposal that the Somalis and the Masai should be used to interbreed with the other Africans so that they can improve their capacity, maybe intellectual capacity of the other people. Now, Sir Charles Elliot came from this era when many British intellectuals believed that the levels of intelligence of someone dependent on their genetics, where they came from. Of course, that's partly true. Where their beliefs are different from what can be argued today is the belief that your intelligence was based on the race you came from, not just the race, but even the so-called tribe and sub-tribe. So when the British come to Kenya, they recognize that some tribes are more intelligent than others. And in this part of his book, he's making the suggestion that the tribes that seem to be intelligent, and in this part, he points out that the Somali and the Masai were the most intelligent of the native tribes, as he calls them the tribes. And he suggests that these two groups of people should be used to improve the quality or the intellectual capacity of the other groups through intermarrying, but he doesn't use the word intermarrying. He uses interbreeding, and I'm going to read that part of the book. Now, Sir Charles Elliot was what was called the Commissioner of British East Africa. He was the highest ranking British official in what was known as the East Africa Protectorate, and this is the land that became the Kenyan colony, and then it became the Republic of Kenya later on. Now, he served in that office from 1902 to 1904. He resigned, and then he published this book in 1905. So this book is very comprehensive, and it discusses many things. Now, this part of the book where I'm reading at the moment is the conclusions. I'm actually done with the book. I'm going to have, I think, one more video, and that is it. I'm done with the book. So these are the conclusions, and he's making suggestions on how things can be improved in the protectorate. And there are suggestions on the economy, the trade, the commerce, but he also makes suggestions on how to improve the natives to make them better human beings, because he thought many of them, there was no hope for them. And he suggests that maybe the way to improve the quality of these people intellectually and in other ways is to have them interbreed. And he suggests that maybe they should use the Maasai and the Somali. And then he says something that, of course, it should not be done with the Europeans. And I'm going to read that part. And this is what he says. I must confess that I am not sanguine as to the future of the African race, nor do I see any ground for hoping that it will attain to the same level as Europeans or Asiatics. In so large a division of mankind, there must be many variations and exceptions, among which the people of Uganda stand out prominently, but it still remains to be seen whether the latter phases of their development will maintain the vigor and rapidity of its beginning. Of course, here he's talking about the Buganda, which he also recognizes as a group of people who are very intelligent. Outside, of course, of the East Africa Protectorate, he considered the Buganda people to be highly intelligent, but he's also doubtful of their progress. He thinks, and he says this in another part of the book, but that he thinks there is a level they'll reach and they will never grow beyond there. Now, he continues saying, it is, no doubt, most unscientific to lump all Africans together as Negroes, but it does not seem to me to be proved that the distinction drawn by some authorities between Bantus and pure Negroes is of much practical value. Now, I've said in another video that he uses the word Negro and Bantu in a way that is very difficult to understand. Also, other terms like Hamitic, there's a way he uses these words that leaves you confused, because you don't get to understand what does he actually mean by Negro and what does he actually mean by Bantu. The way he puts it seems like he believes that Bantu and Negro are two different groups of people. And he also seems to believe that the Nilotics are also not, they are not Negroes. There's a lot of confusion in the way he uses these words. But in this particular part of the book, he seems to suggest that the Bantus and Negroes are two different groups. And he becomes, I would say, somewhat clear here that the Negroes are the black people of West Africa, not East Africa. He continues, or that the former have any considerable power of progress. According to all accounts, the natives of West Africa have reached a far higher standard in art, in religion, in political and social organization than the Bantus of the Eastern Territories of Uganda. So in this part, he's going to make very contradictory arguments about the Bantu and the Negroes. As I've said, he seems to say, or to imply, that the people of West Africa are the Negroes and the people of East Africa are Bantu. So he differentiates them. But then he makes the argument that the Negroes of West Africa have higher levels of development than the Bantus of East Africa. That's what he thinks. But then he's going to make a contradictory argument here. He continues, yet it was from the West Coast that Negroes were exported to America, where their nominal equality and real inferiority to the white man, combined with their growing numbers, constitute one of the most formidable problems which this country has to face. So that's kind of contradictory, because while he says the West Africans have developed more than the Eastern Africans, but then again he says those people, when they have taken out of West Africa, they seem to be not that good. It's kind of like, to some extent it's contradictory, not all the way, but you can see. Then he continues to say, there is no indication that for a measurable period it will be consistent with the welfare of the world to let the African races pass out of their state of tutelage. The best chance of improving them, at any rate in East Africa, is to encourage mixed breeds. So he thinks there is no other hope for the African race, at least in East Africa. He thinks that maybe the best way to get them moved to the next level is to encourage mixed breeds. He doesn't say intermarry, he means having them breed or interbreed, a term that you might think, okay, it's like he's talking about animals. Here he makes a caveat. He says, not, of course, between Europeans and natives, but between the various tribes. So he says maybe interbreeding is the best way out to improve the people, but he says, of course, not with the Europeans. No, it should not happen between Africans or the natives, as he calls them, with the Europeans. It should be just amongst them. And then you are left wondering, if the Europeans are the best breed, and you want to improve these other people you think are not the best breed, isn't it maybe the best results are going to come out from having the Europeans and Africans? Maybe, I'm thinking, but that's not the way he processes that, I think, because there's a lot of pride in him that he's European and Europeans should be out of that. They are way above to be in that game. Now he continues to say, the Masai and Somali are a superior, though somewhat unruly, strain which might be advantageously blended with the Wanyika and Wakambas. So he says, the Somalis and the Masais are superior, but they are unruly. There's something he doesn't like about them, that they are unruly. But he thinks they can be used to improve the other groups of people, and he mentions the Wakambas and the Wanyika. Now, I've said this several times, and I think some people are struggling with it, and I understand. Some of these things you need to get your emotions out of the way so that you process the information. When you read this book and many other books written or documents that were written in late 19th century, early 20th century about Kenya and Africa in general, you have to be prepared to be offended, and you have to be prepared to come into information that might make you feel a certain way. And this is one of such kind of information. And we need to, of course, as I've said, you need to get your emotions out of the way so that you process this information. It's so important to process this information, because then we get to understand the logic that drove the policies that were put in place and put us where we ended up being put. And it's important for us to understand this, because there are policies and ways of thinking today that come close to this, even though it's now not acceptable to, of course, express these ideas in public and in officially published documents. But those ideas still exist in some groups of people, and some of them are in very high, powerful positions, and they can influence how things are done. So it's important to understand these things. I don't think it's helpful for us to hide from it because of how it makes us feel. Those are my random thoughts.